Hello and welcome to my presentation on adaptive coastal management and resilience in East Anglia in the UK. My name is Kelly Fisher. I'm a flood and coastal erosion risk management senior advisor working for the Environment Agency. So I'm pretty sure everyone on this call knows what coastal change is, but what is adaptation to coastal change? Well, it's adaptation to a changing environment, and coastal change is not new. And that's a surprise for some of our stakeholders in the UK sometimes. I've got an example here. On the right, I've got an image of a Roman representation of North Norfolk, and on the left, I've got a modern day image. You can see that relative sea levels were higher in Roman times, and this is a little bit of a surprise for some of our stakeholders who think that sea level rise is very much a new thing. You can also see on the image on the left, between Eccles-on-Sea and Waxham, there are some little points on the coast. Those are offshore rock reefs, and that's just a way we've adapted to hold the line or defend this area. But adaptation also isn't new when it comes to engineering interventions. This is Slate Cottage in Walcott. It was really badly damaged in the 1953 tidal surge, and it was physically dragged inland afterwards to move it further away from the eroding coast. And that's just a way we were adapting even in the 1950s. Now, traditional defences are a form of adaptation as well, but are they always appropriate? At the moment, we have a situation where a property may be constructed, it then becomes vulnerable, there's a demand for protection, protection is installed, which leads to a false sense of security, then there's more investment in the area, which ultimately leads to more risk. We may need to adapt as a result of a shoreline management plan policy change. Those are the policies that dictate the intent of management on our coastline in the UK. But adaptation should always focus on risk reduction, whether that's life, assets, health, the economy, or almost anything else you can think of. There are some delivery issues when it comes to adaptation, and compensation is a big one. Defence in the UK is undertaken through permissive powers. Therefore, there's no statutory right to defence and no statutory right to compensation either. And as a result, there's no clear funding sources for adaptation. As a result of that, we sometimes lack joined-up policies and decision-making, including the planning process. But ultimately, if we understand the costs of no intervention, i.e. the costs of doing nothing, then we can really see the benefits of adaptation. I'm going to take you through some case studies in Norfolk and Suffolk of adaptive coastal management. The examples in brown are erodible frontages. We've got Haysborough, Trimmingham, Hemsby and Winterton, Thorpe Ness and Eastern Bavants. And then the ones in blue are flood frontages. So we've got Aldenore Estuary, East Wash, Cley and Salthouse, as well as Bacton and Walcott. In the UK, the Environment Agency undertakes management on flood frontages, whereas coast protection authorities, or local authorities like councils, undertake management on erodible frontages. But the Environment Agency retains the strategic overview of both. This is Haysborough in North Norfolk. Now, in 2009, the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs funded some pathfinders. These were pathfinders to test adaptation to coastal change. So that rule surrounding compensation was made a little more flexible as a result of this pathfinder approach. Now, on the left-hand image, that's 1996, you can see properties running perpendicular as well as parallel to the coast. You can also see some traditional rock groins in place. Now, if we move through the images over to the far right in 2012, you can see some differences. The properties are no longer there. The people living in those properties were given money through Pathfinder to relocate elsewhere. This was a very special case, and it proved quite successful. It showed that relocation could be cost beneficial. You'll also notice there's a new access ramp cut in the 2012 image. This ramp works with natural processes, unlike the old steel and concrete steps that used to be in place. There's also a new car park, and that can be rolled back, as well as new public toilets. and a local landowner was so impressed with the scheme he gifted some land for a children's play area. This really rejuvenated Haysborough, and they could focus on other things rather than just erosion. This is Trimmingham. This image is from 1966, and you can see what's going to happen to Loop Road, that's the road closest to the cliff line, as we move through time. This is an image from 2001. You can see that the landslide has started to affect Loop Road. This is a deep-seated rotational landslide on 60-metre high cliffs. Trimmingham provides us with an example of an area where we probably couldn't have sustainable defences, even if we had a blank chequebook or lots of money. Here's a current day image. You can see there's not much of a difference between 2001 and the current day image. And this is because this deep-seated rotational landslide fails in an episodic manner. That means that rather than eroding at a rate of, say, 2.5 metres a year, it actually erodes at 25 metres every 10 years. And that's an important point because we need to communicate that to our stakeholders so that they understand their risk. We did attempt defence in the 1970s, and let's see how it went. Well, in fact, it didn't go very well at all. It really didn't go very well. And defence was abandoned. The landslide is just too powerful in this location to provide traditional defences. And as a result, we have a community that really feels ready to adapt. The shoreline management plan policy in this area is manage realignment, as opposed to hold the line, which means defend. This is the Pilgrim Shelter, or the Village Hall in Trimmingham. It's located in the 1 in 20 erosion zone, so it's predicted to be eroded in the next 20 years. Now, the Pilgrim Shelter was relocated through Pathfinder. That was the initiative I mentioned in Haysborough. Here it is. Now you can see it hasn't been physically dragged backwards like Slate Cottage in Walcott. It's been rebuilt elsewhere. Now, Pathfinder money was utilised as seed funding to attract further money. Lottery funding was put in, and a local wind farm developer also donated a ground source heat pump. This is Chairman Terry Brown. It's thanks to his hard work as Chairman of the Parish Council and other community members, including North Norfolk District Council, that this initiative came to fruition. This wouldn't have happened without the hard work of the community, and a community that really felt ready to adapt. This is Hemsby and Winterton. 17 homes have been lost here since 2012. This is a rapidly eroding sand dune cliff. At the time these properties were built, it was actually an accreting sand dune, but through time it's now started to erode. Now this frontage couldn't necessarily have defences through the usual processes. That's because we were always concerned they may exacerbate erosion elsewhere, and also because there simply wasn't cost-benefit under government treasury rules to put them in. However, these are some temporary defences known as hexi blocks. They were really put in as a trial, and they were acknowledged as not an ideal form of defence, but they allowed the community to have their voice heard, to try some temporary defences in place. And then because we investigated these defences, we were also able to start talking to them about adaptation as well. Here we have a cafe at Winterton. It's right on the edge of the dune. The next image shows that. Now we've been working with the cafe owner to look at rollback and relocation options. She's also put in some temporary defences, the concrete blocks that you can see, and re-profiled the cliff line to try and slow erosion a little. And in the background you can see some fishing huts. These have also now been relocated as well, further inland through the planning process. Here we have Thorpe Ness. This is a very dynamic shingle coastline. Now this is eroding quite rapidly. You can see we've got some temporary gabions in here. But this house is a new build. Now this wouldn't normally be permitted, but this is a very special home because it's a kit home. That means it can be put on the back of a lorry or a truck and relocated elsewhere. This allows the homeowner to retain some asset value, and it also means that we don't need to stifle development in the location. It just needs to be appropriate. This is Easton Bavants in Suffolk. The red line boundary on the map shows you the land ownership within Easton Bavants Limited's name. Now, since 1925, they have lost 50% of their land through to erosion, and as a farm, they're no longer sustainable. So they're looking at options to diversify their business. The area is designated. It's designated for its paleontology and also its wildlife habitat. So they're considering ecotourism as an option rather than farming. We've also got some access issues. You can see here we've got some concrete blocks between Southwold and Eastern Bavants. These concrete blocks make it difficult for the community to access the beautiful beach. And we're working with the landowner to see if we might be able to install a new ramp on their land so that the community can access the beach. This is the concrete sea wall in between Eastern Bavants and Southwold. You can see Southwold in the distance. This is now an overflow car park, and the money generated from this overflow car park is split between the landowners at Eastern Bavants and the local community. We've got some old redundant farm buildings, and the landowner is considering converting these to houses so that he can sell them and then make more money for his business to then adapt further. These two buildings used to be traditional concrete-built huts associated with the Royal Navy. They've now been converted into holiday lets, but they're not ordinary holiday lets. They can be lifted up by a crane and relocated elsewhere, so they're really adaptable and relocatable. This is the Aldernaw estuary in Suffolk. Now, this area was badly damaged in the 1953 tidal surge and lives were lost. Now, there isn't sufficient cost-benefit here under Treasury rules for large defences, but the local Aldernaw Estuary Partnership, the local community, have worked together to make their earth embankment defences more resilient. By making their earth embankments wider, they're less prone to breaching, and that makes them more resilient and adaptable in the long term. In the East Wash in Norfolk, we undertake shingle recycling, but importantly, this is 75% funded through a community interest company. So government only pays for 25% of this work, and the rest comes from a precept paid by local landowners, farmers and caravan owners so that the work can continue to be undertaken. Now, Salthouse and Cly in North Norfolk, you can see here the damage following the 2013 tidal surge. Now, importantly, the grazing marsh has acted as a buffer, so houses haven't been affected, but the shingle embankment has been breached. Now, we used to bulldoze this shingle embankment up until 1996 to make it tall, because we thought it would act as a better defence. Now, actually, a wide shingle bank is much better, because it's more resilient to breaching. And you can see here that the shingle has healed itself in the days following the tidal surge. So sometimes nature is best left to do its thing, and actually adapting naturally and working with natural processes is a much better approach. Bacton and Walcott in North Norfolk has just seen delivery of the UK's first sand motor or sandscaping. 1.8 million cubes of sediment has been put in front of a major gas terminal that brings a third of the UK's gas supply in. And that benefit stretches down the coast. You can see the shape of this sand motor, quite long and thin, in front of the villages of Bacton and Walcott to give them extra protection for the next 15 to 20 years. Importantly, this also allows time for adaptation. The next image shows you on the left what the situation was before the sandscaping and on the right after the sandscaping. You can see that the seawall apron was exposed and that we could no longer maintain groins. And on the right, you can now see that Bacton and Walcott have beautiful sandy beaches. Now, lastly, I just wanted to mention the Environment Agency's Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Strategy for the UK. We have three main aims: climate resilient places, today's growth and infrastructure, resilient to tomorrow's climate, and a nation of climate champions, able to adapt to flooding and coastal change through innovation. You can really see that innovation, adaptation and resilience are at the heart of our future strategy and are principles that we hope to embed in the future. Thanks very much for listening.